What was the dumbest thing you thought as a child? I used to think that once you finished a grade in primary school, you became smarter than the teacher of that grade. I used to believe that night is brought about by clouds, dark ones. Of course. Never felt the need to clarify this with anybody. It was an obvious fact. That if you drink while peeing, you'll keep peeing until you stop drinking. That a blow job meant you blow air in a boy's general direction. Thanks to my older siblings for making me believe that one. LOL. Deleted. When I was really young, I was convinced I was pregnant. I'm a man BTW. With a baby cat named Bridget. My family decided to see how long I would believe this, so they never told me how ridiculously impossible that was. I went on believing it for about 5 months. That's how long little me thought get pregnancy lasted. And then, when the baby never came, I went to my mom and asked when Bridget would be born. She finally told me that boys can't get pregnant and humans can't give birth to cats. I was traumatized. Little me was so excited to be a cat father. And then, it was ripped away from me. I was such a stupid kid. Edit. Since so many people keep asking. No, I never ended up getting a cat. And no, I didn't fuck a cat. LMAO. This would have been around 6 years old. And I was raised Catholic and thought God put babies in your stomach. So I thought he put a cat in me. And as for the name, I just really liked the name Bridget. And I still do. That all companies with a TM, trademark, were owned by my family. Only because those are my initials. Edit, are not, were. I was under the impression that there were tiny rats that lived inside of my stomach, and when they ran in their wheels for exercise it would make me need to pee. That there's a tiny human inside the TV who executed what the remote was telling him to do. For example, when you press the button to increase the volume, he is being hit in a specific way that lets him know that he has to go and manually increase the volume. I thought that highways function like airport moving walkways. I always thought that kids were born with your shit. So one day you would go to the toilet and take a dump, and then if you looked down there would be a child. And I thought that if you didn't check you might accidentally flush the baby. When I was a young kid, maybe between 5 to 9, my dad took me to the tiny grass runway airport in my town. And we went on a short plane ride in a small Cessna around the valley. My dad sat in the back. And I was up front with the pilot. While we taxied off the ramp and out to the runway, I was given permission to move the yoke. I thought I was steering the aircraft the whole way. I told my mom that I taxied the plane. In school I told my class that I taxied the plane. In fact, it was so strong a memory that I grew up remembering the memory without evaluating the experience. I was home on leave from a naval aviation squadron when I was talking about that flight with my dad. And I was thinking about it. And I had this long pause. And I said, "Holy shit, Dad, I just realized that I wasn't steering that Cessna." My father laughed his ass off. I remember watching the movie Cocoon with my grandparents. I could not have been more than 4. For some reason, I deduced that in order to become adults, children had to die in these pool cocoons and be reborn old. I freaked my cousins out and had a whole group of kids crying at a holiday party over our impending doom. Ruined Christmas pictures that year. I believed hamburger and hot dog buns were only available for restaurants, not civilians. Mom used sliced bread, toasted to obliterate the gums, at home to make burgers and hot dogs. I believed that until the age of 10. I thought that there would be a baby inside every girl's stomach as soon as she is born, and inside that baby's stomach too there would be a tiny baby. The cycle goes on, and that the baby keeps growing as we grow, and after getting married the doctors will cut the stomach and take the baby out to make space for another baby. That I would have to change my name when I grew up. I don't know why, but I thought my name was suitable for a child but definitely not for an adult. And I couldn't imagine being an adult with my name. I even talked to my mother about it, saying that at some point we'd eventually have to go to court to have it changed to something more adult sounding. That if people are going to study something they just sit in a circle with other students and think about what they want to do. As soon as they find out, they are done and they can leave. I wish, LOL. I was very young, and I blame Wizard of Oz, but I believe that a tornado was just one big phenomenon that continuously happened and spun from state to state, country to country. I also live in the South, so we have frequent tornado warnings, so I vaguely remember a time we had 2 or 3 warnings in 1 week, and I was scared that single tornado would come to our town and never go away. My uncle is a priest for an obscure Hindu offshoot religion, and he told me quite young that I shouldn't play sport because each person only gets a set number of breaths in their life, and getting out of breath used them up quicker. I used to spend hours laying in bed trying to make my breaths as long and slow as possible. In fairness, I actually have a decent lung capacity as an adult, so maybe it had a positive effect. I used to believe that people that spoke other languages translated their language to mine in their head. I thought if you left a video game on, then a character would come out of the TV and kill you. I was a bit paranoid as a small kid. I was vaguely aware of a TV show called Ironsides, about a lawyer in a wheelchair. Whenever I heard the word paralegal, I thought it meant a paraplegic lawyer. It made sense to me that people in wheelchairs could make excellent lawyers, based on the nature of the job and their physical limitations. Grandparents were assigned to families. I didn't know my grandma was my dad's mom. That the Underground Railroad was a literal secret underground subway-style steam engine that Harriet Tubman was the conductor of. That the local mosque in my city was Aladdin's vacation home. I felt terrible as a kid to eat. I wouldn't eat in front of people, and every meal I would find myself thinking poor food getting eaten because I was convinced they had emotions. Own 2 credit cards and use them to pay for each other for infinite money. That if April was a month, Ninja Turtles must also be a month. That if you poked your belly button too hard, then it would come open like a plug and all of your internal organs would spill out. That babies were inside their mom's literal belly. If she swallowed a cherry tomato whole, I thought it would land and bounce on the baby's head. That beyond my country was nothing. I thought that the hockey player Peter Taglianetti was actually 2 people, a man named Pete Tagli and his sidekick Eddie. If a man kisses a woman for a long time, the woman is pregnant. That sperm were the size of your fist, squeezed their way out of your penis while you were sleeping. If a girl was in the bed with you, and wiggled their way up inside her to conceive the baby, this was based on Facts of Life pop-up book. Where the sperm, where that size. Really terrible reading skills, and parents who wouldn't directly answer my questions just gave me the book. So I figured they were to scale. If babies forced their way out of women at the end during birth, which TV had taught me, I figured maybe nature was balancing the scales by having one of those bastard sperm tennis balls squeeze its way out of the man to begin the process. I knew babies came about by sleeping with each other. I just didn't know how sleeping could do it. And I filled in the gaps. Lived in Germany for a few years. My dad convinced me that windshield wipers were called Flippen Floppen Muckenspreaders. This was pre-Google Translate. I grew up around the time of the release of the Star Wars prequels. I vividly remember asking my brother as to why they released the sequels, New Hope etc. before the release The Phantom Menace, as it made no sense when I was 11 and a prequel was a wild new concept to me. He had me convinced, embarrassingly, until I was about 15/16, that the reason they released the sequels first was because there was a fire at the studio and it burned all the original tapes, so they had to reshoot them. I was so fucking dense. Not something I believed, but a harmless prank I used to play on my kids. There is a highway we use that has several long, gentle curves over a 5 to 6 mile stretch. One day when my younger son complained that the sun was in his eyes, he was about 3 at the time, I had the idea to pretend that I had a personal relationship with Mr. Son. I saw that the highway was going to curve, so I had a conversation with Mr. Son, explaining the situation and asking him to please move over so that he wasn't shining in my son's eyes. I drew out the conversation and timed it so just when Mr. Son agreed, we would start the curve and it looked like he was moving over and out of my son's eyes. Then after another curve, the sun would be in my other son's eyes. So I asked politely for Mr. Son to move again. Just as we went around the next curve, This went on for almost a year before my wife explained to them what was going on. It was hilarious. In the meantime. Edit, a word. Let me start by saying that I was quite little. I think I was about 7 or 8 years old. We lived in the country and I was raised on Disney movies. We lived on our imaginations. Anyways, the movie The Borrowers had just come out and we rented it on VHS. My sister and I must have watched it 20 times. We played games imagining people running around and all these fantastical things. It was great. It passed a lot of time for us. Enter bedtime. I crawl into my little bed. Swirls of games in my head. And I notice a strange light in my closet that is directly across from the foot of my bed. I gingerly crawl out and open my closet to see a small slit in the dry wall. I press my eye up to it and see a sun and trees. There is a whole world in my wall of my closet. Holy shit. The borrowers have a world in my closet. I run and get my sister. I show her. We freak out and run downstairs, where my father is gently reading his newspaper after a long day of work. My mother is sitting there talking to him when we bust around the corner screaming about a hidden world in the closet. My father glares at my mother. My mother tells us she will look into it and brings us back to bed and reads us another story to calm us down. The next night, there was no light. The trees were gone. I destroyed the world. I truly thought I had erased this little existence. I was a murderer. No. I had seen a slip of my mother's marijuana closet farm. My dad made her move it. Ah. Child innocence and overworked imaginations. The magic of childhood. I thought Wichita, Kansas was where all the witches lived. I also thought Jefferson County was where the Jeffersons lived. I wasn't afraid of being on a plane and it crashing because I thought that as long as I could get to the window/door quickly, I could just jump out the second before it hit the ground.